All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Top 5 for Small Business, the top 5 killers of productivity in your business and how to address them with Lori Vanderkroll. The Top 5 series features experts in human resources, marketing, accounting, and other topics to help small business owners be successful. Before we begin, please remember to mute yourself during the presentation and use the chat function to interact with each other and to ask questions of our speakers. Today, we will have an interactive portion. And if you do not see 2 links from Lori in the chat, please let us know and we will re-add those. I will be monitoring the chat for your questions throughout the presentation, and there will be a Q&A session at the end. If you require alternate translations during the presentation, please use the Wordly chat link in the chat. Today's presenter is Lori Vanderkroll, owner of Life Made Simple and creator of the Pro Action Planner. Lori is a productivity consultant, speaker, and trainer who helps busy professionals and growing businesses across the country implement systems to increase efficiency and success. She has developed programs that help her clients manage their time, space, and information. Her work has resulted in savings of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours for her clients, and a considerable reduction in stress and frustration, which we can all relate to and need. Thank you so much for being here, Lori. Let's dig in.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thanks to Greater Des Moines Partnership for having me speak today. I love speaking on this topic, very passionate about it. So let's just dive in. I have a lot to cover in our hour that we have today.
Real quick, Lori, before I let you jump in with the reins, I am getting messages that we may not see the links in the chat. Can you re-add your items?
Yeah, I wonder if because I put them in before.
So early, yeah. That's okay. So you will get those updated.
I'm going to have to back out of this to get them back in there.
No worries.
And I have a QR code that people will be able to use as well. So there'll be a couple different options, just one handout. So there'll be a couple different options to get to that.
Thank you, Lori.
Okay, there's the handout. Hopefully people are seeing that. And
yes, we do.
This is a link to the electronic version of it. So you can either print out the handout and fill it out on paper, or there's an electronic version. And then I'll have a QR code that'll bring you to the electronic version as we go as well. And we won't need this for a few slides yet. So you have time if you want to print it out.
Great. Thank you, Lori.
All right, let's go back to. Oh my goodness. There we go. We should be good to go now. You seeing it? Okay.
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great, perfect. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's dive in. I had a slide on myself. Meg covered a lot of my background, just so you know a little bit who's talking to you today. I actually started my career as an actuary and did that for 13 years. And as I was looking back at this slide, I realized that I've been doing what I'm doing now as a productivity consultant for quite a bit longer than I was an actuary. So maybe I don't need that on there anymore, but I think it's helpful to kind of know where people come from. I decided to start my business in 2005 with a partner. It's grown and changed and morphed over the years. But now today I work as a productivity consultant, helping individuals and businesses, like Meg said, to better manage time, space, and information, and really to just find balance and have success in their lives and businesses. So I do live here in the Des Moines area. I work with people locally and virtually as well. So today we're going to dive into those top 5 productivity killers. We're going to first look at the impact that productivity has on your business, both good and bad. We'll look at your own productivity scorecard, kind of see where you're looking right now. Then I'll introduce those top 5 killers that I've seen in my work, the top 5 killers of productivity, and then work through some tips and strategies to improve on each one of those. So that's the plan for today. So because I was an actuary, I was a math major, I was a stat minor, I always love to throw some stats into my presentations. But I think this is an interesting one. 83, the study that was done in 2022, so really not that long ago, post-COVID, kind of at the end of that COVID area, the study was done on workplace employees, and 83% of them said they suffer from work-related stress. So that's a pretty high number. And 25% of them said that their job is actually the number one stressor in their lives. So it's important to dig into this a little bit more and find out where that stress is coming from. So if we look at these main causes of stress among US workers, number one cause of stress is workload. So it could be the workload, it could be the balance, it could be not knowing what those priorities are. So you feel the workload is worse than it is. So there could be a lot behind that 41%. 20% is work-life balance. Probably not surprising to many of you. 6% job security, and then 33% interpersonal issues, which I can't help with that side of things. But actually though, interpersonal issues, there can be some productivity organization issues behind those interpersonal issues as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. But I feel like what we go through today can really impact some of these percentages, and especially that workload, work-life balance, and understanding what the stress is behind that, and some systems and tools we can put in place to start to impact these numbers. So how does productivity impact the business and just the overall environment of the business itself? So one is financial results. Obviously, if you have low productivity, your financial results are not going to be as good. So improve your productivity is going to increase that bottom line and your ROI. Productivity is also going to impact your team dynamics and culture. And you might not think about that as something that impacts kind of the HR side of things, but definitely the way that people work, how productive, how organized they are, the way that they interact and work with others and collaborate with others, that's going to impact team dynamics and culture. And so that's an important thing to look at as well. Motivation and attendance. We'll get into this quite a bit in the top 5 productivity killers. When you have low productivity, that's going to impact a lot of the reasons for that low productivity is going to impact motivation, how motivated people are when they're at work, and then whether or not they show up at the same time. It's going to impact your quality of product and services. The more productive you are, the higher quality you'll have, the better service you'll provide. And then just overall success and growth of the business as well. It's a really important piece of business. So I want to take a break here and look at your own productivity scorecard before we dive into what I see as challenges across the board. I think it's important to kind of take a look internally and do a little bit of reflection ourselves. So we're just going to take 5 minutes. As I said in the chat, there's 3 ways you can access this. You can download it from the chat, print it out. You can use that link to go onto my website and just fill it out electronically, and you'll get an email with your results. Or you can use this QR code that will bring you out to that same electronic version of it online. So let's just break for 5 minutes. We'll come back it's 9:11 I have, so we'll come back at 9:16, and then we'll kind of dive into those different areas of productivity. Okay, we're at 9:16, so we'll come back together. So Emily, I will say, I noticed I have a light above me that certain days and certain times of the day, it gives a really bad reflection. So I've turned, but if it gets too bad and all you're seeing is a bright light, let me know. Hopefully I'm okay now that I've turned, but I did see that this is going to be one of those days. So
You look great. It
okay,
looks
thanks.
good.
Okay, so hopefully you all had a chance to get through that scorecard. If you didn't score it, the scoring really, it's kind of more for fun. The scoring isn't as big of a deal. It's really about looking at those different pieces of productivity and where you might be having your largest challenges. This is actually a tool I use with every client I work with, whether it be, I have an individual version for individuals, and then this business version for the whole organization. So it really gives you a place to look at what you're doing well and where some of those larger challenges are and where you might be able to focus your time to see improvement right away. And then you can do this regularly to see how things are changing and hopefully how things are improving over time. So in fact, I just worked with a client, a small business, to develop a customized version of this for them, updated the questions to better fit their needs. And then they're going to do this every year. They're going to have every leader fill this out every year so they can keep a really good gauge on where they are with things. So I want to ask quickly before we go forward, if you look at your scorecard, just throw in the chat which number was your lowest score on there. And I've got it here so I can read off the questions that we're seeing as the lowest scores. But where were you seeing those strongly disagrees or disagrees when you filled out the scorecard? See if anyone's willing to share.
I don't know if I memorized the number. But
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you do the well,
but the cataloging of physical articles, I would say, is something I personally don't know about in the organization.
the physical stuff.
And maybe a weak point.
Yeah, good. So the physical information, shared records, that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you did it electronically, you don't have the number, just throw in like a couple words that you feel like were some of your biggest challenges as you went through that. All right, looks like people maybe aren't wanting to share, which is, we've got number 6 meetings. So yeah, meetings are a big one. Oh, we've got a couple there with meetings. We'll get into that a little bit today as well. I'll share a tool that you might use for meetings, but there's a lot of waste in meetings out there for sure. 1, 2, and 10. So physical information as well, electronic information that's shared, and clear records retention policy. So really around that information management is the biggest challenge and a big challenge we see as well. Definitely record keeping. It's easy to rush through and not save important documents properly when you're super busy. That's definitely true. And so having the right system in place and making that as easy as possible will help to make sure that give you a little more chance that you're going to do that even when you're busy. So, okay, good. Well, thank you for sharing. What I'm going to share today is what I see across everyone I've worked with over the past 20 years, where I see as those largest challenges around productivity and really what those killers are for businesses that I work with. As I do this, I'm going to share examples of clients I've worked with so you can kind of see real case studies and probably compare it to some areas you've seen within your businesses and other businesses as well. So without further ado, the top 5 killers of productivity, this is what we're going to look at today. Number 1 is undefined roles and responsibilities among the team, unclear goals and priorities among the team as well, lack of structure and process in the business, poor system implementation, and disorganization of time, space, and information, which is what came up for some of you in that scorecard as well. So let's dive into each of these. The way I'm going to do this is for each one, I'm going to give a case study. So somebody I've worked with that really struggled in this area. And then from there, we'll look at how do we turn this around and what are some things you can put in place to really improve in these different areas as well. Oh, and the one thing I wanted to mention with the scorecard too, is that is something, I'm seeing the light a little bit. That is something that you can use in your companies if you want to use it strictly as it is, or come up with your own. That's definitely a way you can survey your leaders or your employees to see where they see the largest challenges in your business and really focus in those different areas. So I wanted to mention that before I move on as well. So number one, undefined roles and responsibilities. So my case study here is a medical office that I worked with. They had several locations across the area, and they had some people that were working in those different leaders working in different locations, so not always in the same place. The issue was with the leadership team within this company. Their titles weren't clear, or they were confusing. They had a different title than maybe what they were really doing, or it just wasn't clear. The team itself was really focused on who was at what level and who could tell who what to do, and what that structure, that org structure really looked like. Whereas the owner and the president of the company, they just wanted the work done. They didn't care who did it. They didn't care who was at what level. They just wanted the work done. And so there was some miscommunication and some misunderstanding there. People were in positions that they weren't necessarily trained to be in or didn't have the background to be in. And some of the people in those positions were friends of the owner and the president, which that's not always a bad thing, but in some situations that can cause some issues. So they were confused about who was supposed to do what, who was responsible for what, bottom line. And then they would blame. It was easy to say, well, that wasn't my responsibility. I thought she was supposed to do that. So it was very easy to push off responsibilities and blame others. It led to some competition. Morale was pretty low. There was a lot of talking about each other behind each other's backs, and the trust among the company just wasn't very strong. And because of this, they were starting to experience turnover, not able to keep people. And so you can see a lot of, with this specific example, leads to these issues that you see with undefined roles and responsibility: confusion, fear, competition, blame, duplication of efforts, waste of time, energy, and money, lack of motivation, because if you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing, you're not sure what your priorities are, you're constantly being blamed, you start to lack motivation. And then that can lead to turnover. So what can we do to turn this around? So another thing I want to point out as we work through the presentation today is I've built these slides as far as tips and strategies in a checklist format. So you can use this. You'll get this slide deck after the presentation today. You can actually use this as a checklist for your own company. Do we have this in place? What does it look like? Is this something we need to work on? So use this as you work through and try and improve in your own areas with this. So first, you want to make sure you have that good accountability chart in place. So make sure it's clear, it makes sense, you have the right people in the right seats, everyone knows what their roles and responsibilities are, and that's shared and communicated with everyone. So just to show you an example of what this might look like, this is an actual accountability chart for one of the clients that I've worked with. I've made it a little more general, taken off names, but this is what your org chart might look like, and it's clear. We know where everybody is. We know who reports to who. In this situation, the red boxes are external partners. The blue boxes are the employees. And so again, very clear, communicated among the entire company. Then you may want to dig deeper into that accountability chart and give everybody 3 to 5 bullet point of their roles. So pull these from the job description. What are 3 to 5 things that we count on you for every day? This is the meat of your role. This is what you should be doing, what your focus should be. And this can be part of the org chart. So again, makes it very clear who should be doing what. It allows you to work through that as a company, as a leadership team, so everybody knows what they're responsible for and what everybody else is responsible for as well. Now, I'm not saying this is cut and dry. There may be some overlap. There may be times when one person may have to be in more than one position, but this brings you a long way towards having that clarity and making sure everybody's on the same page. You want to make sure to have that management team input into this so that they take ownership and they feel like they're a part of it and they're clear on it as well. Then another thing I want to dive into as far as well-defined roles and responsibilities is assessments. So this gets kind of to having the right people in the right seats and to understanding each other as a team as well. So you've probably heard of some of these assessments before: DISC assessments, Berkman assessments, other personality assessments. I do have a slide here that brings in 4 of the kind of the top ones that I've been familiar with and heard of, and my clients have used in the past. It goes through what each one is, how they're different, and it might help you decide which one might fit your company the best. But these are great tools to use for team bonding, to really get to know each other, and in the end, to find out if people really fit the seat they're in, and whether they have the values, the strengths, the expertise, the passion for that role that they're in. So these can be very helpful tools to use for that as well. And like I said, don't feel like you have to write all this down, because you're going to get this slide and be able to utilize this down the road. So the other piece of this is communication. So having a clear way to communicate all of this to the leadership and to the employees, so everyone's again on the same page. And regular review. This should be reviewed at least annually. Look back at that org chart. Does it still make sense? Do we have the right people in the right positions? Are they understanding their roles? Just continually reviewing that and making tweaks where necessary. Okay, so now we'll jump on to killer of productivity number 2, which is unclear goals and priorities. So my example I have here was a larger company I worked with but a manager of that company brought me in to work with one particular person. This person was great at what they did. They had a lot of expertise, but he felt that they just weren't as organized and productive as they could be, that they were forgetting things, not following up on things, things were falling through. So he hired me to work with him and set some systems up in order to improve his organization productivity and leadership around these different projects. As I started working with him, we definitely did put some things in place, systems in place. But one of the issues that he was having was that he never really understood what his priorities were. He thought he was pretty clear on his role description and what he was supposed to be doing, but his leader kept telling him, well, why didn't you get this done? This is a priority. And he kept changing the priorities and telling him that he was supposed to do things that he didn't feel were under his role and his job description. And so that was causing him a lot of stress and confusion. And that's a lot of the reason he wasn't getting some of these things done. So it really came down to unclear goals and priorities for this particular person and changing priorities over time. So again, and in this particular case, this employee, even though they were a great employee and they were really good at what they did, they were looking elsewhere because they were frustrated with the lack of clarity they were getting. So they were starting to look for another job. So again, a good example of what unclear goals and priorities can lead to: confusion, again, blame, duplication of efforts because people don't know what they're doing. So two people might be working on the same thing, leads to waste of time, energy, and money, lack of motivation, and turnover. A lot of the same things that you heard from the first killer of productivity is similar for this unclear goals and priorities. So you need to have clear roles and responsibilities, and then you need to know what your goals and priorities are within those roles and responsibilities. So some tips around this: how can we turn this around? First is you want to have a clear mission, vision, core value for your company. This may seem obvious, but there's a lot of small businesses out there that don't take the time to do this, or maybe they do it, but then they don't share it and continue to look at it and review it and communicate it. So making sure that you review your mission, vision, core values, that they make sense, and that everything you're doing supports that mission, vision, and core values. It has to start there. So that's the first thing you want to work on. That can then lead into your strategic planning. So based on that mission, vision, and core values, what's our strategy? What's our long-term goals for the company as a whole? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And making sure you're communicating that as well. Then that leads down to your annual goals and goal setting as a company, and then within departments and specific people as well. So I want to dive in a little bit to goal setting, because this is an area that I see quite a bit as a challenge among companies, and doing this the right way and doing it consistently. So again, to share some statistics around this, a study that was done, a Harvard Business study was done, found that of the people, the workers that they surveyed, only 14% said that they had goals. 14% of everyone they surveyed. That's, to me, is a very low. And of those 14% that had goals, they were 10 times more successful than those that didn't have goals. So just by having goals, that can hugely make you hugely more successful than those who don't. And of the 14% that had goals, those that wrote their goals down were 3 times more successful than those that didn't write their goals down. So again, have a goal, write it down. That takes you way ahead of a lot of other people that are out there. So it sounds simple, but it's not always easy to do. So many of you have probably heard of SMART goals. It's out there, around there a lot. So these are goals that SMART stands for: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-oriented, which I agree with. I agree that goals should be written this way, so that you are clear and everyone's clear on what they are and how we're going to measure them and how we know how we're going to get there. But I found that it was sometimes hard to set those SMART goals just with no support, with no tool to figure out, how do I write this goal so that it is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-oriented. So I developed a tool for this that you are welcome to use. In fact, if you would like a copy of this, shoot me an email. I'm happy to, Lori@alifemadesimple.com. You can find it on my website anywhere, but I'm happy to share this. But this is a tool that you can use to actually get to those SMART goals. It works you through those questions you need to ask yourself as an individual, as a team, as a company, to get to that SMART goal, and then gives you a place to start to work through those strategies. How am I going to reach this goal, and what are my targets throughout the year to reach this goal? So you're asking, I call it the 5W1H, because you have those 5 W's and 1H, 4W and 1H questions you need to ask yourself. And then the 5th W is to write it down, so you have that written goal. So what do you want to achieve? Why does the goal matter? It's always important to have that why. If you ever run into challenges, you go back to that why. When do you want to achieve the goal? Who will be involved? And where challenges might arrive. So that's kind of your risk management piece of it. So I won't spend too much time on this today, but making sure you have something like this in place so you can set those SMART goals and you can communicate it, and everyone's on the same page and knows what their goals are. Again, you can use this as a company or as an individual. I wanted to show too that at any point in time, anything you're working on should tie back to those annual goals, those long-term goals. So if you look at your strategic planning, your long-term goals, then you're setting those annual goals. Those annual goals can lead to quarterly and monthly goals, which lead to what are my weekly goals, which lead to what are my daily goals and what I'm working on at any certain point in time. So it all builds up together. If you don't have that first piece, the annual goals, and it's not clear and communicated among everyone, then you'll never know if you're working on the right things at any point in time. So very important for the company as a whole. I've said this before, I'll say it one more time, just communicate. You can't over communicate. So once these goals are set, make sure everybody understands the goals, that they're clear on the goals, and they know how they fit into them. You want to have regular check-ins in place. So these should be scheduled times where you check in as a business on those goals and see how are things going. Is there other things that have come up that are new priorities that we need to kind of rejuggle? Are there things we're getting behind on, areas we're finding challenges in? Do we need to change our plan? So just regular check-ins, whether this be monthly or quarterly, depending on the goal, depending on the business, those should be scheduled throughout the year. And then make sure if you're making changes to your annual goals that they're intentional, and again, they're clear. So if you're doing that regular check-in, then those changes can become more intentional. Everybody, again, is on the same page. You don't have that frustration down the line of things constantly changing and not understanding what our priorities are. Okay, so we're going to jump into number 3, and then I'll break a little bit and see if there's any questions out there. So number 3 killer of productivity is lack of structure and process. So I see this a lot because people either don't really know where to start with structure and process, or because it's one of those things that takes a lot of time and nobody's knocking on your door for it. So you have to set time and priority in order to make this happen. So an example I have of this was a company, actually a company that I'm working with right now. They're a very busy retail store, growing very quickly. And they did have some structure and process in place. So they had some workflows built out. They had some systems put in place to manage those workflows, manage the things they needed to do. But not all of their structures and processes were documented and laid out. And for the ones that were, not everybody was trained on them. They had new people starting and they didn't have a process in place where they were continuing to train people. Or the people would be trained, but then it wasn't consistent and they weren't checking up on it. So people would just forget things and stop using the structure in the process. So they were there somewhat, not being used well, not across the company as well. The team was, because of this, because they were growing so quickly and they didn't have the structure and process they needed, the team was feeling overwhelmed, overworked. They were frustrated because they were having to work so much and things were harder than they needed to be. But they wanted to, they're a very passionate company. They wanted to still provide that high level of service and product. And so it was causing a lot of, like I said, overwhelm. They were tired. They were stressed. They were worn out. They were starting to make mistakes, and the mistakes were causing them a lot of money. So they made mistakes in the area of customer service and working with customers. They made areas in the financial area with the accounting, and it was costing them money. And so this was the time to kind of get back and step back and say, okay, what are we missing? Why are these things happening? What structure and process can we put in place? What can we refresh and retrain everybody on? So lack of structure and process can lead to duplication, inconsistency among the company, frustration among employees. You have that waste again, can lead to poor service, low quality products. So it really can hurt that bottom line of your business quite a bit. So jumping into some tips and strategies for structure and process. Documentation, the fun part that everybody loves. But the thing with documentation is it doesn't have to be just pages and pages of text. It can be checklists. It can be visual workflows. You want to have responsibilities, timing behind those, when does this happen? Who's responsible for it? So it doesn't have to be what we all think of documentation of. It can be visual, it can be checklists, it can be bullet points. So one example of this is a workflow example, again, an actual example of a company that I worked with and a workflow we built out for a sleep study that they offered. So this just actually, it works through the whole process, and I won't get into how workflows work and what all the different shapes mean, but just to let you know that this is a way to document a process. It can be visual like this. And the purple boxes here that we had for this one, those were areas for improvement. So where can we automate? Where maybe do we not do this? Do we need a better checklist, or people don't really understand or aren't clear, or it's not working, there's a challenge there for some reason. So those are, as you work through the workflow, you decide where are our parts where we can improve, and then put a plan in place for those improvements. So this is one way that you can document and improve processes. So we talked before, several of you mentioned meetings as one of your biggest challenges. Meetings to me can fall under structure and process. So having a structure for those meetings, having a process or guidelines in place for when you have meetings, who's invited, what it looks like. So I wanted to offer a tool for this because I do think there's a lot of wasteful meetings out there. And wasteful meetings ends up wasting everyone's time. It may waste money for the company as well. So you should, for every meeting, have an agenda, and that should be clear and sent out to everyone ahead of time. You should know who's going to be at that meeting, who's leading the meeting. Make sure that the people there need to be there, that it's important that they're there. And then have that agenda. So know exactly what you're going to talk about, stay on topic, get it done, what you need to get done, figure out your next actions, and then you can move on and the meeting's over. So there's a lot of different places you can get templates for this. Most everyone uses Microsoft Word, and you can get great meeting templates right from Microsoft Word. So these 3 steps show you where to find those. There's a lot of different ones out there, so you can find the one that best fits your needs. If you're a company that uses EOS or Traction, if you're familiar with those names, there's a level 10 meeting template that's great to use and can be, if it doesn't work exactly for you, can be customized a bit as well. So there's a lot of different opportunities and tools out there to start to have those good meetings and have that structure you need to have those valuable meetings. You want to make sure when you're putting together your structure and process that you have the right supporting tools and systems and resources in place to support those processes. And we're actually going to get into that a little bit more in the next Killer Productivity, which is system implementation. But your tools and your systems should be supporting those structure and processes that you have in place. And then training is always a piece of that. So when you have a plan in place to put together a new structure process, to update a structure process, make sure training is a piece of that. And everyone, again, is on the same page. They know how they fit in, and they know you have tools in place. So it makes it easy for them to follow that structure, follow that process. Okay, so I've gone through a lot in those first 3 killers of productivity. Before we jump into the last 2, has there been any questions? Anything anyone wants to dive into any deeper? Do a quick look in the... Not seeing anything in the chat. No, not yet. Okay, I'll keep moving along, and hopefully we'll have a little time at the end as well. Like I said, I'm throwing a lot at you in a short amount of time. So hopefully you're absorbing and finding some areas, even if you come out of this or 1 or 2 areas that you feel like, oh, that's an area we really need to work on, then that's worthwhile and valuable. So let's jump into number 4, killer productivity, is poor system implementation. This is one that I've seen over and over again within all size of companies, large, small, even just individuals. And all, if you think of all the apps you have on your phone and apps that you've put on your phone just because someone told you you should, or it popped up and you thought it looked good. So just looking at the way that we're implementing the different tools and systems that we use. So example I have here is actually a larger company that I worked with that had a lot of different departments and teams. And they implemented this huge, expensive, extensive system, but they didn't roll it out across all the departments with consistent training, consistent guidelines. So nobody really understood how they were supposed to be using it, when they were supposed to be using it, how it fit into their particular projects and work that they were doing. Because of that, you had frustration among departments, and they just dropped the system and would use something else that they had been using or something else they thought worked better for them. And so you had inconsistency across the company. You also had waste of money and time on that system that not everybody was using. I see this quite a bit. In fact, this has become kind of a pet project for me, and I've done full webinars on implementing systems in the right way so that you aren't wasting that time and money and energy and having that frustration across the company. So some things that you can do to make sure that you're implementing systems appropriately and have successful system implementation. First thing is a needs analysis. Now, this can be a very deep, extensive needs analysis, or it can be something very simple, just a few questions you can ask yourself. But really thinking about the need for that system and what that system should look like and what challenge you want it to solve before you dive into choosing the tool and starting to set up the tool. So a good needs analysis is going to look at your vision for what you want to be able to accomplish with that tool, challenges you might come across, how it needs to coordinate with other resources and tools you have, looking at specific features that you might need within that system, and then putting that plan together to find the system and implement the system. So taking some time to do that needs analysis first can save a lot of stress and time and money in the long run. Once you have that needs analysis, then you can choose the best fit tool. So based on your need, what tool is going to be the best fit? You probably won't find that 100% perfect tool that's going to fit your needs, but what's going to be the best fit based on that needs analysis that we did? So making sure you take that step by step. Once you have the best fit tool, then you can put your project plan together so that you can implement the new system and be able to maintain it. So that project planning is a whole big monster in itself, but making sure that you're clear on how will this be implemented across the board, depending on the size of your company, who's all going to be using it, and that you know how it's going to be maintained and everyone will be trained on it as well. So that leads into my next one. Make sure you have training on the new system. Everyone understands it. They're clear. Training may be more than just a one and done. You may have to be training over time. Let's start with this piece and let's really make sure we understand that. Then we'll go to the next piece and train on that. And you can start building from there. With systems, I always like to say, start as simple as possible. Only use what you need to use to get started. And then once people are clear and they're comfortable with that, you can continue to add on from there. So don't feel like you have to use all the bells and whistles and features from the beginning. Start as simple as possible. You want to have a plan in place for maintenance of the system to make sure that you're continually reviewing how you're using it, whether you want to add new features or functions, that everyone's using it the way they should be using it, whether you maybe need some new training. So have someone in taking ownership of that maintenance of that system as well. And regular review that kind of went along with the training and maintenance that I talked about before. So I should say with that system implementation, if anyone is interested in learning more about that needs analysis, I have a lot of different tools and things behind that as well. So if that's an area you struggle with, reach out and I'm happy to help and provide some tools and advice there as well. Okay, our killer number 5, disorganization of time, space, and information. So save the best for last. This was one that came up in some of the challenges that you guys found on your scorecard as well. So example I have here, I actually have a couple examples on this one. This is probably what I deal with the most with my small businesses and my entrepreneurs and my individuals that I work with. So with this case study, it was the same medical office that I mentioned earlier. They were growing and they were running out of space for their physical, not only their physical furniture, but their physical files and everything that they were storing as well. So they had a lot of paper, inefficient use of the way they were using their space. And so we looked at going paperless, really did get them almost paperless, got rid of almost all of their file cabinets, and rearranged the way that the space was set up and the way they were using their storage to make that more efficient as well. But if you don't have this organized and productive space, you're going to have all, it's going to lead to all these things again. You're going to have confusion, frustration. If people aren't organized themselves, they may have some fear that they're missing things, they're forgetting things. They may get to the point where I don't even know if I'm doing my job right because I'm so disorganized, I can't manage my time. That can lead to blame again, duplication of efforts, waste, a lot of the same things we've talked about before, those same challenges that we had with the other killers of productivity. So another example I want to talk about, I talked about the business example of disorganization of time, space, and information. I also worked with an individual recently who led a whole team, again, great at what he did, but his office was a complete mess and he couldn't find anything. And he probably had way too much paper and stuff than what he needed anyway. And so we spent a half a day and cleared things out, restructured, organized a couple of drawers, labeled, just, did those things that, again, seem like common sense, but we don't always take the time to do it. And the difference it can make in the way that you spend your day, your ease of finding things, even the way that you're able to manage other people, because you have an organized, clear space where you can find what you need digitally and physically. So the one thing I want to note on this, though, is on the physical side, you can never be as organized and productive as you need to be if you're limited by space. You can't know if you're limited by space until you get things decluttered and organized. So that's the first step. Once you get things to the point where you feel like it's pretty clear, it's pretty organized, we have what we need, we still don't have enough space, then it's time to look and see how can we add, how can we rearrange, how can we maybe have people working off site and look at different options around there. So that's one challenge that sometimes you can't get past unless you actually expand as you grow. So if we continue to look at disorganization of space and information here, this shows kind of different areas of clutter, disorganization, overwhelm. When you look at these pictures, just put in the chat real quick, how does this make you feel when you see these pictures? What are some of the feelings you have? Stressed, yeah, stress is definitely one I hear the most. Anxiety, yeah, that's a good one as well. Stressed, anxiety, overwhelm, tired, done. Those are a lot of the things I feel. So if you're cluttered, if you're disorganized, this is how you're going to feel. But if we look on the flip side, if you have organized time, organized space, organized information, how do these pictures make you feel? When you look at this, what are the feelings you get? Ready to work, refreshed. Thanks, Christy. Organized. Accomplished, that's a good one, accomplished. Which kind of goes towards being, feeling productive, feeling accomplished. So yeah, so just when you're thinking of the space that you work in, whether it be physical, digital, or the way you manage your time, this is kind of the feeling you want to have. This is the vision. This is what you're working towards when you're thinking about those different challenges. So looking at some tips and strategies behind this, again, this could be a whole day presentation, but I want to give you some high points as far as attacking these different areas. One is putting in place systems for the art of organization. So what do I mean by that? So I use this acronym ART. Everything that comes into your space, whether it be your office, your computer, your email, your phone, your mind, anything that comes in, any type of information fits into one of three categories. It's either actionable, it's something that you want to keep for future reference, or it's something you can get rid of. It's trash, it's toss, it's shred, it's delete, whatever that means. So if you just start there and do that one division, is it actionable, is it reference, or is it toss? That's a great way to get started. And once you've done this, you can start to do this with every piece of information that comes in. So you need to have the systems in place so that when you make those decisions, you know right where they go. It's actionable, it goes in this file, or it goes in my Outlook tasks, or it goes in my paper planner. It's reference, it goes in this file system that I have set up, very organized. So having the systems in place to be able to do these things when you make these decisions as they come in. Again, so getting to the time management piece of this, again, it's the disorganization of time, space, and information. It all flows together, but when we look specifically at time, we're never going to have enough time to do everything we want to do. But we will have time to do those most important things. The key is knowing what are those most important things. And that all goes back to what I talked about earlier with knowing your goals, knowing your priorities, and then making sure you're working on anything at the right thing at any point in time. But you have to have the tools in place to do this as well. So I did want to show time management is really a huge thing. There's so many different pieces to time management. And I just wanted to show you these critical areas of time management. So when you're thinking about, I do struggle with time management, I'm overwhelmed, I have too much to do, I can't manage my calendar. These are all the different areas you can dig into to say, where am I struggling the most with my time? As an individual, as a company, as a team, where are we struggling the most with our time? So again, you'll have this slide, you can look at this, but these are the different areas of time management that you want to consider and dig into and look at improving. You want to make sure you're scheduling time to do this. Again, this is, if you look at the quadrants, the urgent, important quadrant, if you've heard of that before, this is an important but non-urgent piece of project or task. So this is something nobody's necessarily asking you to do. So you have to put time in to do this. You have to make time to plan. You have to make time to declutter and organize your physical, your digital information. So that needs to be scheduled in, whether that be weekly or, weekly maybe for maintenance, once a year to do the whole thing. Whatever that means for you, it has to be scheduled in or it won't happen. You want to do this for the business as a whole. So maybe have an office clean out day once a year where you allow everybody time to do this. And then you want to make sure you're doing this individually and having that schedule individually as well. Then you need to know how you're going to maintain it. So once you feel like you have good systems in place, how am I going to maintain this? How has this become part of my routines and my schedule? And how am I going to hold myself accountable to this? It starts at the top. For a small business. You need to set the good example as a leader so that everybody else will feel like they can spend the time and hold themselves accountable for this as well. You may have an accountability partner that you work with and make sure that you're holding each other accountable for getting these things done as well. If you've heard of kind of twinning, you may decide that you want to get on a Zoom call with somebody and you just both work on your spaces at the same time. So there's a lot of different ways that you can put that accountability in place. And then having the support you need. So as a leader, as a manager, supporting your employees to have the time to do this, because it's going to, again, save so much time, energy, and money in the long run. So getting back to our 5 keys to a productive business, we had the 5 killers of productivity. Now we've turned it around, and these are the 5 keys. So working through all those different checklists that we had as I went through today, making sure you get to the point where you have these 5 keys that are supporting your successful small business. So coming out of this, I ask that you maybe come up with 1 or 2 actions you can go work on right away, whether that's be a tool that you want to look at, if you want to reach out and ask me for a specific tool, if there's, want to go back and talk to your team about better meetings, whatever that is, what are 1 or 2 things you can come out of this and focus on in the next week so that make sure you're starting the effort and just kind of can roll from there. So because productivity is never an accident, it's always the result of committing to that focused effort. So I'd love to get in touch with you all. I have a link tree that has all my links. I'm on social media everywhere, so feel free to reach out, email me. I'd love to just get in touch and meet you all a little bit closer and get to know you all more. But that's all I have for today. So we are close on time, but hopefully have time for if there are some questions out there. I have a couple minutes here.
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions for you. One of which is, what tools or areas should really small businesses with, a handful of employees really focus on?
What specific tools? Is that what they're?
Yeah, so if they had to pick, and they're, have 5 or less employees, what tools or areas of the productivity chart should they start to focus on first? What is the priority there?
I honestly think the priority is always starting at kind of that top, like knowing what your mission, vision, core values are as a business and what your goals are, where you're going with the business, to make sure everybody's on the same page there. So that's where I would always start, knowing that everyone knows what their roles and responsibilities are. With a smaller company, the org chart isn't quite as important. If you only have 5 people, the org chart's very small, but at least knowing that everybody knows what their roles and responsibilities are and how they fall into those goals. That's where I would always start. As far as tools, I'm not one that recommends one specific tool, because like I said, I like to do that needs analysis with the company and find the tool that best fits their needs. That said, I do love Microsoft Office for a small business because it gives you almost everything you need to manage your business in one place, and it can all Coordinate and Connect, and Outlook's, a great tool for email, task management. There's so much you can do, contact management, so much you can do with Outlook. And then you've got Teams where you can collaborate. There's a planning system in there. There's so many different things with Office 365. So I will throw that out there as a tool. But that said, make sure that it's going to fit your needs and your challenges and whatever you're going to use it for. So hopefully that helps a little bit. It really does depend on the business. So it's a hard question to answer.
Awesome. Thank you. And I will get everyone out on time today. It is 10 o'clock. Thank you so much for being here. Our next top 5 for small business will be Wednesday, August 23rd. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.